Good morning to everybody. Can you hear me in Pecos Hall?
Yes, we hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Today is Thursday, April the 10th. This is the continuation of our Oil Conservation Commission hearing. My name is Gerasimos Rosados. I am the acting director of the Oil Conservation Division and also the acting chairman of the Oil Conservation Commission. We are continuing our evidentiary hearing, the consolidated cases by Goodnight Midstream and Empire, New Mexico. The case numbers are as follows: 24123, 23614 through 17, 23775, 24018 through 24020, and 24025. As I stated, this is the continuation of the evidentiary hearing. Mr. Hearing Officer, I transfer this hearing back over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Rosados. Good morning, everybody. Let's see, do we have a court reporter? I'm not seeing Kendra Tejas' friendly face.
There is a court reporter on.
Yes.
I just don't know.
Yes, sir. I'm on. Good morning. We're on the record.
Oh, okay. We're on the record already. Okay, great. All right. So first of all, I guess thank you, Dr. Mpoma, for I may speak for everybody on this. Thank you for a relaxed morning. So is there a motion to start off the day with our mid-morning break? All right. Okay. So let's see. We are still on Mr. Rankin's cross-examination of Mr. West, correct?
Correct, Mr. Hearing
Mr.
Officer.
West, I'll just remind you that you're under oath. You may proceed, Mr. Rankin.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hearing Officer, before we do, just want one point of order for housekeeping matters, and I've discussed this with counsel for Empire. I had circulated a anticipated witness list for Goodnight once we resume our case, once we get our case started. I'm making a slight modification to that just due to witness availability. Mr. Macbeth will be unavailable to be here in Santa Fe the third week of April when we resume. So for that reason, I'm going to ask to move him up from second in order to first in order, because I think it'd be very important to have his testimony be in person.
Okay.
Okay. And I've discussed that with Empire, so they're aware.
All right.
Okay.
So assuming Empire's case is done sometime today, you'd be your first witness.
He'll be my first witness.
And there's no objection to that, Ms. Hardy?
Mr. Examiner, we don't object to moving him up in the order. We would like to, if we do get to Mr. Macbeth, we would prefer to do it tomorrow. I don't know that we're going to finish Mr. West today, so that may not be an issue. But we weren't prepared to have Mr. Macbeth go.
Believe me, I understand the issues around that. It's not easy to, when they're shuffling of witnesses, that was an issue on our end as well. I'm not doing it to make it difficult for Ms. Hardy, but if there's a way we could at least get his summary presentations done. I'm not sure, I agree with her. I'm not sure we're going to actually get to Mr. Macbeth today, but if we do, I would like to at least get his summary presentation done potentially, but we'll confer during a break with counsel for Empire.
Well, let's see how the day goes, but it seems reasonable then is it Mr. Macbeth?
It's Macbeth.
If Mr. Macbeth, it seems reasonable that Mr. Rankin could get through the direct exam if time permits, and hopefully time will permit. I don't want to make any advance rulings on your request, Ms. Hardy, because the effect might be to unnaturally prolong cross-examination.
And we are fine with Mr. Macbeth doing his direct examination today. It's just the cross that we would like to do tomorrow.
All right. Well, let's for now, let's play it by ear. But Mr. Rankin, thank you for that heads up. And are you ready to proceed?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I apologize. I also wanted just a slight wrench for tomorrow. I do need to be done by 3:45 tomorrow, so just keep that in mind with the cross examinations and everything. We need to kind of cut a little shorter tomorrow, so I just wanted to throw that out there by 3:45.
Okay, thank you. Reminding all of us that time is always of the essence. All right, Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Thank you, Commission Chair and Commissioners. Good morning, Mr. West.
Good morning.
I'm going to pick up with your slide number 8 from your summary testimony of your direct examination by Ms. Hardy. And this slide is a slide that we just talked about a bit yesterday. It's slide number 8 of your presentation, and it's your exhibit I-5 from your direct testimony. As part of your analysis of water production in the EMSU, did you evaluate the completion intervals for the wells that you've identified on this exhibit?
They're completed in the Grayburg.
Did you evaluate the specific zones within the Grayburg that they were completed in as part of your analysis and assessment of water production?
And this slide here, it sums them all up just as Grayburg.
I understand that, but as part of your determination about whether or not there are other factors or other sources of water that may have explained the water production values here, did you evaluate what zones they were completed in?
Yes, whenever we was doing the full evaluation, we looked at the well bores and see where they were completed.
Okay. And so you incorporated that consideration into this analysis?
Yes, sir.
And based on your assessment, you've determined that there's no other explanation for these water production values but for communication with the San Andres?
That's the most likely.
Okay. And you ruled out then potential encroachment from Goat Seep?
I mean, there is a small encroachment that's, from the Goat Sleep, but that's all the way to the far west.
How did you rule it out? Did you rule it out?
Well, if you're on high up on structure, it's hard to get to bypass the other wells and get the Goat Seep up to those high structured wells.
You showed us an exhibit from Mr. Lindsay that showed how, based on his testimony and his measurements, Goat Seep water is encroaching all the way to the top of the structure. Agree?
I don't think that's what the exhibit showed.
You don't recall, you were here for Dr. Lindsay's testimony, weren't you?
Yes.
And you didn't hear him testify that the Goat Seep was encroaching to the top of the structure?
I do not remember that.
Okay. Okay. And you're assigned, you're in charge of operations for EMSU on behalf of Empire, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And as part of the head of operations for the EMSU, you would be charged with understanding all the engineering factors that potentially would affect operations and production in the EMSU, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, as far as encroachment, what was your evaluation? What did you do to evaluate the potential effect of Goat Seep encroachment as part of your analysis?
So one thing you look at is the production from the well bores and the pressures, like the pressure data we showed you earlier, is that those pressures in those zones drop down to low pressure, 200-300 pounds on RFTs. So if you had a strong aquifer support, you would have more pressure there.
Do you have
drop off that quickly? And it's well documented that this is a solution drive reservoir in the Grayburg.
Do you have RFT pressures for these wells showing that these wells with a high water production have low wellbore pressures?
Not all of them, but if you go to the RFT on the 211, that you can see that those zones, you had lower pressure.
Is the 211 identified here as a well that has high water production?
I don't remember exactly where the 211 is on here, and
Isn't it up here in section 32?
would have to quote on the map. I don't know.
Okay. But as I sit here and look here today, I don't see our EMSU 211 here. Do you see it on your map?
do not, but it's an example of, how the pressure is lower in the well bores and that it's, that it's pulling down, indicating that you don't have a strong aquifer support.
If the 211 truly had a low pressure, and isn't the 211 in your analysis completed in, or isn't it completed partially within the upper San Andres?
The 211 has RFT pressures through the whole section, including all the way down into the San Andres.
So if it's got low pressure, why isn't it showing up here as a well that has high water volumes if it's pulling water up from the San Andres? If the San Andres is overpressured at this point and would be pushing water up into the Grayburg, why isn't the 211 one of the wells you've identified as having high excess water production?
I didn't say that it would have high excess water production. I said that it shows that the reservoirs in the Grayburg are depleted, showing that there's not a strong aquifer support.
Okay. But I think one of your explanations was that the lower pressures in the well bores would be indicative of a lower pressure in the Grayburg, correct?
Lower pressure in the Grayburg would be lower pressure in the Grayburg.
And as a result of lower pressure in the Grayburg, my understanding from your testimony is that the San Andres is at a higher pressure than the Grayburg at present, correct?
That is correct.
And the higher pressure in the Grayburg, based on engineering principles, would push water up into the Grayburg. Isn't that your opinion?
In the lower zones of the Grayburg, that is correct.
Okay. And so why are we seeing the AMSU 211 as one of the wells identified on this exhibit with high water as a result of influx from the Grayburg? Rather, influx from the San Andres?
I think it's irrelevant to this slide.
Okay. Now, when you reviewed the slide yesterday, I think I understood you to say that when you discussed it, that there's no set pattern in the way the water production shows up here across the MSU. Is that correct?
Yes, you can see that there's no one big cluster of water. So if you had a strong water influx from the Goat Seep, all the ones to the far west would have a lot of water because that's closest to the Goat Seep as you're coming off a structure.
Okay. Now, I asked you yesterday, we discussed this a little bit. You said in your testimony that you believed it's well documented in different papers that there's water migrating from the San Andres into the Grayburg in the MSU, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We talked a little bit about the papers and sources that you could cite or relied on. And then I asked you whether you were aware of any papers starting in the 1930s that documented that there was water encroachment in the MSU. Do you recall that discussion yesterday?
I recall the discussion.
And since we had that discussion, have you had a chance to refresh your memory or do any additional work to determine whether you're aware of any papers from the 1930s that address that issue?
I did go back and look to try to find the 1930s paper. I did find one, but I don't know which one you're referring to.
I'm going to pull up on my screen this paper from July 1939. Mr. Hearing Officer, I'm going to move the admission of this as Goodnight Cross Exhibit number 18. This is a United States Department of the Interior Bureau of Mines paper. That's a report of investigations relating to reservoir characteristics of the Eunice oil field in Lee County, New Mexico.
Any objection from Empire?
No objection.
OCD?
No objection.
Rice?
No objection.
Highland?
No objection.
Okay, it'll be admitted.
Mr. West, is this the paper that you reviewed last night or this morning?
Parts of it I did review this morning.
Okay. Is it, prior to reviewing it this morning, were you familiar with this paper at all?
No, it was not.
Okay. So you weren't aware that Goodnight's expert, starting with its direct testimony filed in August of 2024, cited to and relied on this paper in this case?
Can't say I remember every reference.
Okay. So you're not aware of this. You prior to yesterday when you reviewed it, you were not aware of this paper and its analysis in 1939 in the Eunice Monument South area?
Can't remember every exact paper that I looked at, but I did not remember it as of yesterday. This exact paper.
So because you have no memory of it, it appears to me that it wouldn't, you didn't rely on this paper in your assessment of water production in the EMSU, correct?
No.
Okay. And prior to yesterday, you're not familiar with the paper and its description of different zones within the field and how they're isolated by low porosity and permeability intervals?
There's definitely different zones in the field.
I'm asking you about this specific paper and its analysis. Prior to this morning, when you reviewed it, were you familiar with the description in the paper regarding the variable porosity and permeability and its effect on well production across the field?
You have to show me on it, but no, if I didn't look at it before this morning, then I probably wouldn't know, right?
I was trying to confirm that. I mean, prior to this morning, you didn't incorporate any of the findings or analysis in this study in your assessment of the effect of water on the EMSU, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned also yesterday a Love paper by Mr. Love. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And we discussed, I mentioned yesterday that we had discussed that paper extensively during Dr. Lindsay's testimony. And at the time, it was marked as Goodnight Cross Exhibit Number 1. Do you recall that discussion with Dr. Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
And I think yesterday you mentioned that you thought that this is one of the papers you cited as potentially discussing some aspect of San Andres being creating an influx into the Grayburg. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the Love paper that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you disagree that this paper addresses and confirms that there are conformance issues within the EMSU?
It discusses the conformance issues. That is correct.
Do you disagree that the conformance issues it addresses in this paper are the same issues that you've highlighted here in your exhibit I-5?
No, those are different conformance issues.
You think they're different conformance issues?
Yes.
How are they different? What's different about them?
This is indicating that you've got, so the Love paper, you're talking about the zones coming across. You're talking about when you're actively water flooding. This slide is before the water flood. So this is production before the water flood, and the paper is addressing water flood conformance, two separate subjects.
Okay. So you're telling me that the Love paper does not address in any way the effect of edge water coming in and affecting water production in the EMSU?
I may address some. I mean, there's a light aquifer support from the Gray Reef.
Okay.
Goat sorry about that.
Yeah. So your opinion is that the issues here identified in your exhibit I-5, because are separate and unrelated to anything or any of the analysis discussed in Mr. Love's 1998 paper?
To the form, I think it misstates Mr. West's testimony.
I'm trying to clarify, which is why I'm asking the question.
Just rephrase the question if you would.
Well, Mr. West, trying to think how I asked the question. So I'm getting at the point is that you're telling me that you think that the Love paper addresses a different issue because it's related to just conformance within water flooding and not the effect of edge water on those conformance issues. Is that a fair characterization of your opinion?
The Love paper affects water flood conformance issues.
Okay. And are you telling me that it does not address the effect of edge water on those conformance issues?
It might, but you're in a water flood at that point in time. It might mention it in there. I can't remember exactly.
Okay. I'll go ahead and pull it up. And I mean, I guess my point is, Mr. West, that here it goes on. It talks a lot about, as you're correct. It talks about conformance the variability, the porosity issues, the high circulation, high zones of high production of water. And then it talks about the focus area, and the first sentence of this description about the focus area, which is on, I believe, page 4 of the document, states that quote, conformance problems were observed over the entire field. Did I read that correctly?
Mr. Examiner, I object to Mr. Rankin testifying. There was a long list of testimony before Mr. Rankin got to his question.
All right, Mr. Rankin, it's a fair objection. Try and just, I know you're trying to lay a preamble in a complex technical area, so it's a judgment call, but try and bear that in mind if you would, please. Thank you.
I'll restate the sentence of the question on page 692 of the paper, page 4 of the document. It states, quote, conformance problems were observed over the entire field, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And it cites to figure 7 to support that statement. Agree?
Can you show me figure 7?
I will. So here's figure 7. It states that wells that have symptoms of poor reservoir conformance are marked by a large circle. Do you see that?
See that?
And then under the title of that image, it says Edgewater Drive. Do you see that?
I see it on that image.
It's not titled Evidence of San Andreas bottom water plumes.
Yeah, so if we can like set everything in context to go up in the paper to describe the zones.
Yeah.
So if you could scroll up.
What are you looking for?
Scroll up, I'll tell you when. It'll say the zones, how it defines a zone. Zone 1, zone 2, zone up a little bit higher. Keep on going, next page is. All right, right here, see there's zone 4, zone 5. Go ahead and scroll up so you can see zone 1, zone 2.
You want me to go up?
Yes, just up a little bit farther. So when we refer to the, so it's talking down below about zone 1 and zone 2. So when you refer to that, that's where it ties back to the MSU 211 RFTs. You're taking in that zone 1 and zone 2, which has very high permeability streaks, and those pressures are low. If you're getting that much edge water support, you wouldn't have had that low of pressure there. Okay, I do think it's important here to go to zone 4, and then where it describes zone 5, which is, it says it's typically a water drive. It has, a little bit more water. In zone 6, zone 5 and zone 6 says that it overlies the top of the St. Andreas and contains an unconformity in the upper part, and that there's oil wells shown well down into the St. Andreas. So it's kind of it's confirming here that zone 5 and zone 6 is in direct communication with the St. Andreas and the contributing water.
Where does it say that zone 5 and zone 6 are in direct communication with the San Andreas contributing water?
It says that it's a high, it's typically a water drive, and that it is, that it includes the top of the St. Andreas, into what they consider zone 6.
It says it overlies the top of the San Andreas. It doesn't say includes the San Andreas.
Overlies, it's implying here that the St. Andreas is part of that zone. Consider it impacts that lower zone of the Grayburg.
That's your opinion?
Yes, that's what it says, and it says oil shows well down into the St. Andreas. Another proof of record that there's historical records of oil in the St. Andreas.
Mr. West, I'm not talking about oil yet. I'm talking about water, and we can talk about oil later. And Mr. Knights addresses that specific quote in his analysis. But I'm asking you about water here, and you're telling me that overlies is the same as includes.
If there's fractures in between the connects, they're using it in the same context of the zone here.
Does this paper address fractures, or to say anything about communication or influx of water from the San Andreas into the into the Grayburg?
It's saying that's typically a water drive from those zones.
Okay,
including-
and where it says that it's a water drive in figure 7, it talks about Edgewater, doesn't it? And it shows in the analysis, talk about implication, it's implying that the conformance issues are a direct result of the Edgewater, correct?
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say
says that-
Edgewater Drive?
It says that wells have symptoms of poor reservoir conformance and
That-
are marked by a large circle.
That title of the paper, of the figure does not say Edgewater Drive?
That's what that says, but there's no implication of what it's telling. It says thin gas cap up at the top too.
Okay, so over here where it's interpreting or discussing the figure, it's saying that conformance problems were observed over the entire field, correct?
That is correct.
And it refers down to figure 7, which is titled Edgewater Drive, correct?
It's not titled. It says it there, probably implying that, that southwestern corner, that's where it was affected from. They put it on that graph. That is not a title. That's a label.
Okay, and your own expert, Dr. Lindsay, and you're telling me you don't recall this testimony, but this figure shows that there is the goat seep, which is by Dr. Lindsay's own testimony, the Edgewater that encroaches all the way up to the top of the structure. Do you disagree?
Yeah, it has some, mix in there of the Edgewater.
Okay.
But it would be not have the sulfate, right? So you wouldn't have the barium sulfate problem.
Going to your exhibit 9, which is on the same topic here. This is your exhibit I6 from your direct testimony, correct?
That is correct.
And this is an image or figure from the 1983 Technical Committee report, correct?
That is correct.
One moment. I thought I had it pulled up. I apologize. I have so many files in your folder, Mr. West.
There's a lot of documents to keep straight. There's no doubt this is a big case, a lot of technical things. And forgive me whenever I don't recall off the top of my head.
There may have been a reason I didn't open it because it's a big file. Okay, so is this the 1983 Technical Committee report that you were referring to in your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you and I discussed this yesterday? Do you recall when I was asking you when we looked at this figure in your PowerPoint on slide number 9, I was asking you whether or not there was any specific references in the technical committee report that interpreted this image, indicating that it was reflective of an influx of San Andreas water into the Grayburg. Do you recall that yesterday?
I remember the discussions of talking about the papers. I don't remember the exact, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. So what I'm asking you here now is, do you recall any specific language, discussion, analysis relating to this figure from the 1983 technical report or anywhere in the technical report that discusses a determination or conclusion or even an indication that there's an influx of San Andreas water into the Grayburg?
I'd have to reread it, but this is where it's showing historical high plumes of water production.
Okay, but that's different than what you said yesterday, isn't it?
Objection.
I'm asking him if it's different than what he said yesterday.
I do not recall fully what I said yesterday in reference to this particular one.
Okay.
We was talking about a lot of historical references, and I don't remember my exact wordings on this one.
Okay, so as you sit here today, you're telling me that
Mr. Rankin, I'm going to interrupt a second. There was an objection that was raised. The hearing officer did not get a chance to make his decision. We need to, I mentioned this many times before, you guys. We need to keep decorum in here. There was an objection raised. The hearing officer has to make his decision before we continue. Please make sure you follow these rules. Mr. Hearing
Apologize.
Officer, there was an objection. I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I guess I didn't hear that. All right. I'm going to have to go back and see what the question was.
I think Mr. Rankin
Well,
rephrased
the
his
question,
question.
let's see. The question was, you asked him if what he said today is different from what he said yesterday. Okay, that's a fair question. Objections over.
And that wasn't my objection. My objection was to his prior question. He then rephrased it to ask the question that you're mentioning. So I don't object to the rephrased question.
Okay,
Thank
then
you.
that cures it. All right.
I apologize, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Ms. Hardy. I didn't mean to curtail the opportunity to address the objection. I apologize.
That's all right. And while we're talking about decorum, both of you, please try and remember not to talk over each other for the sake of the record and especially the court reporter. Thanks.
Mr. West, you can answer the question.
Can you restate it? I don't remember after that.
What you said today about that this image or this chart shows water production values is different than what you stated about the chart yesterday. Is that
I do not
correct?
remember what I stated exactly yesterday. This is, depicting high water cume values in different points of the field whenever it was put together prior to the water flood.
Is it your opinion that this chart shows an influx of water pluming from the San Andres into the Grayburg?
I believe that it gives you, that is a great indication of that would be a way that you would get the isolated plumes of water into the structure.
Okay. I'm asked now, my next question, Mr. West, is there anywhere in that 1983 technical committee report that interprets this chart to indicate that there is an influx of San Andres water into the Grayburg?
I do not remember.
So since our discussion yesterday where I raised this with you, did you have an opportunity to go back and review the 1983 technical report to find any such language?
I did not review that entire report.
Okay. In this paper, in your exhibit here, I-6, you refer to this chart. I'm going to skip down to it. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that this is, so we have the whole page. This is the page that you pulled for your exhibit, correct?
Yes, that's the diagram.
Okay, and it's titled Eunice Monument South Unit Mesh Perspective on 1981 Water Production, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Hearing Officer, I'm going to go ahead and move into admission the 1983 Technical Committee Report from April 1983, and I'll mark it as Goodnight Cross Exhibit number 19.
Empire, any objection?
No objection.
OCD,
No objection.
Rice,
No objection.
Pilot.
No objection.
All right, it will be admitted.
Mr. West, I did a search on this, and I'm not going to subject everybody in this room to it, but I could find no direct discussion, interpretation of this figure. It's just so we can see. It's listed as figure 12 in the technical committee report. I could find no direct interpretation or discussion of this figure in the technical committee report. Do you recall yourself seeing any interpretations or discussion of this figure in the technical committee report?
Object to Mr. Rankin testifying about what he found in the report.
Well, that's fine. Mr. West, are you able to identify yourself any discussion of this figure in the technical committee report?
Can't say I remember the 167 pages right now. This was used in our frame of reference of time of water production from the field.
Okay, so, but you're presenting this as evidence of, or at least an indication of communication between the San Andres and Grayburg, correct?
That is correct. That is an indication of communication where you have historical high water volumes up structure and low down structure you do not.
Okay. So this, you're telling me that this grid is all on the high structure, is that correct?
I mean, it covers a big chunk of the field, right? But you could probably see on here the two folds that Lindsay shows there where you would have the fracturing, right? You got the one initial hump and then you got the next initial hump. They kind of line up.
I don't see any structure on this. This is a mesh. Isn't this a mesh perspective on water production?
That is correct. No structure on there, but you've got the double humps coming across the field from off, down dip. You got the first hump and you kind of have that line of higher water there. Then you have a dip where there's none. And then you have where the structure gets reflexed again. You have a line of higher water production again.
So your opinion is that this water production correlates to the structure. Is that correct?
That's indicating where you would have, fracture zones that Mr. Lindsay indicated of those flexures.
So the pattern here potentially would be based on structure, agree?
It would be where there's flexing and fracturing. And whenever the rock is bent, especially a dolomite, there's a lot of fracturing that occurs and more vertical perm.
On your next slide, or not your next slide, I don't think it's the next one. I'm going to skip over 10 and go to slide 11 here. This is an exhibit from Dr. Buckwalter, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on the left is a snippet that applies to discusses the Arrowhead Grayburg unit, or AGU. Agree?
That is correct. It's from the Chevron unitization, I believe, technical.
And in this case before the commission currently, there's no testimony or evidence to establish what the depths are of the San Andres and the Grayburg in the Arrowhead Grayburg unit. Agree?
I don't know for 100% fact.
Okay, as you sit here, you can't recall any testimony or facts or exhibits presented by Empire or anybody else that address or clarify what the San Andres or Grayburg depths are in the AGU. Agree?
Correct. This has been on the MSU, but in this paper, they refer to the MSU.
Okay.
So
On the snippet, does it refer to the MSU?
it doesn't on this snippet, but if we pulled up the paper, it does.
Okay. Why wouldn't Mr. Buckwalter, I mean, well, it doesn't, Mr. Buckwalter did not identify in this exhibit anything relating to the MSU, agree?
The water production over to the right, that snippet he has, the higher water production, the MSU.
That's true. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But as to the snippet he included on the AGU, it does not reference the MSU, agree?
So you're referencing just what's highlighted in red?
I'm referencing what Dr. Buckwalter deemed important to include in this exhibit.
It looks like to me that he deemed important that, water influx from the San Andres to the lower Grayburg, and he deemed important as the high production of water and different plumes in the MSU.
Doesn't say anything about the MSU in that snippet, does it, on the left?
So I asked you if it was in the red, if that's what you were referring to, and you said you're referring to the whole slide. So I went back to the whole slide. Are you referring to just what is highlighted in the red?
I'm asking you the information that Dr. Buckwalter pulled from the AGU report. Does it reference anything about the EMSU?
It's just that snippet in the square box that does not have a reference to the MSU in that.
And as to the AGU, in this case, there's been no testimony or evidence to establish that what is referred to as a San Andres influx in this snippet here from Dr. Buckwalter that he refers to is not just goat seep edgewater coming up into the AGU from down structure. Agree?
It says that it's a solution gas drive. So if it's a solution gas drive reservoir, you do not have strong aquifer support.
I'm asking you though, Mr. West, that there's no testimony or evidence to establish that San Andreas influx is not just goat seep edge water coming up into the AGU from down structure.
It couldn't be a solution gas drive reservoir if you had aquifer support.
Okay, but there's been no testimony or discussion around the AGU in this case. Agree? That relates to the Edgewater Drive in the AGU.
Object to the form, I think, lack of foundation.
That's fine. I'll move on. That's fine. I'll
Well,
move on.
okay, hold on. I do have to rule on the objection. And so I'm going to sustain the objections because, and I don't know how comprehensive they are, but my notes of Dr. Buckwalter's testimony include a statement where he said there's no evidence of strong aquifer coming into the Grayburg, for what that's worth.
Okay. You referenced this other image on the right that Dr. Buckwalter pulled from and included in his testimony here. It is Exhibit M3, and that's also from the 1983 Technical Committee report as well, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And to your best of your knowledge, Mr. West, as with the prior figure that we were just discussing in that Technical Committee report, were you able to identify any discussion in the report about this figure or an interpretation to go with it?
I don't remember off the top of my head. We'd have to pull up the document and look at it, but it's a large document also.
It is. But as you sit here, you can't recall, are you, Mr. West, is Empire relying on this image of water production from 1981 to establish that there's communication between the San Andreas and the Grayburg?
It's a piece of data indicating that you have unexplainable high water production up structure.
Okay. Now, it's your opinion that it's unexplained, that water production is unexplainable. Is that right?
Well, no, I guess actually you can explain it from water influx from the San Andreas.
Okay. Now, your opinion is that there's water influx from the San Andreas and that this image is an indication of that. Agree?
It indicates high water where you wouldn't typically expect high water.
Okay. Now, in your review of the you reviewed the 1983 Technical Committee report, didn't you?
I have at one time. I didn't do it last night.
And you would have been looking for every detail or snippet of information that would support your position. Agree?
We're looking. Can't say I didn't miss any.
Okay. But if you had found something that supported this interpretation of this image, you would have included it in your testimony or in your exhibits. Agree?
Yeah, I mean, if support the case, but that's a strong indication of water.
Okay, I'm going to just skip down to where I believe that I'm not sure exactly what page that is on, so I will not attempt to find it. But you agree that's in that Technical Committee report, right?
That is where it stated where it came from, and yes, I do.
So while there's it does, I guess I reviewed this and I did find some discussion of information about communication. And here on page 5 of the Technical Committee report, the Technical Committee wrote, quote, "At this time, there is insufficient data available to determine the degree of vertical reservoir communication." Did I read that correctly?
That is what you read in there. It looks like it's saying that they had thoughts that there was vertical reservoir communication at the time. They never would have put it in the report.
It's actually hard to tell in this context whether it's addressing vertical communication within the Grayburg itself or between the Grayburg and the San Andreas. Would you agree?
Object to Mr. Rankin testifying about what the article says.
It's overruled.
It's talking about vertical reservoir communication.
Can you determine based on this paragraph or the context whether it's discussing vertical communication between the Grayburg and San Andreas or within the Grayburg itself?
It's talking about vertical communication.
Okay. And there are some other additional discussions about water production in the unit. And it discusses at some length an assessment of water production. And here on this page, which is page 22 of the report, the technical committee states, quote, however, after analyzing individual well production records, it is obvious that the water production is not evenly distributed throughout the field. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And that matches up pretty well with your exhibit I-5, agree?
Yes, with I-5 and the other exhibits of the different spots of high water.
Right. And then further down on that same page, it goes on to say that the technical committee attempted to make to correlate, to determine whether that water encroachment was uniform. Do you see that I've highlighted here?
Yes, I'm just working on reading all of it.
Okay. Goes on to say that after comparing water production decline rates and structural position for the leases within the field, they determined that there was no clear trend. Do you see that?
Yeah, so if you had edge water, you would have a clear trend.
If the structure were uniform, agree?
And that structure, you got down dip, you got up dip, you would have a clear trend, but clear trend would be in reference to structure.
Okay, and are there not variations in porosity and permeability all through the Grayburg?
Yes, there isn't any reservoir.
Okay, and especially in a complex carbonate system such as the Grayburg in the EMSU, agree?
Yes, it is a.
Okay. Now,
Flip back there real quick. Get one other thing down at the bottom. I just wanted to read before we went off of it. Considering the entire unit area, the water production history does not indicate a strong or uniform water drive mechanism. Okay, I just want to make sure I read that right. Got it.
all right, moving off that topic, here on slide 12, this is referencing your rebuttal exhibit N8, correct?
That is correct.
And I think I understood you to say that this slide is no longer accurate because you've changed your opinion about the depth of the pressure datum, correct?
That is correct. We changed it because it was referenced on the paper as 250, but it makes more sense as my original analysis was as a negative 250. And I incorrectly switched it to the 250 because I read the document for what it was.
So rather than referring to N8, I guess should it be, is it I3?
Yeah, the original one would be a better one to talk from.
Okay. So this, your testimony as it stands today is adopting I3, not N8, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I guess my question is why did you change your mind about that pressure datum?
Just it made sense that it matches up better with Mr. Buckwater's original models of the pressure being proper, and that, you know, its position in the reservoir makes more sense.
Okay, but no new data, correct?
No new data.
And no new papers or information that you evaluated to make that determination, correct?
No, just had to make the determination that it was incorrectly stated on that original paper.
That it was, what was incorrectly stated?
That is 250 sub C instead of a negative 250 sub C.
Okay. Now, the next slide here, going back to your slide presentation, same thing with this one. We'd want to refer instead to your original testimony, the exhibit that correlates to this one in your original testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, for that far pressure curve to the right.
Okay. So that would be exhibit I4, correct?
Yeah, that's similar to it.
I guess my question is, I'm trying to figure out what your final testimony is on this issue. Is it what is stated in Exhibit I-4 or what's stated in Exhibit, this revised Exhibit I-4 on your slide presentation?
Yeah, just making sure I'm just reading the two of them clearly to the key points over to the right and things. But yes, we can go with the original one.
Okay. So as you sit here today, your final testimony on this pressure data will be this original testimony, original exhibit in your direct testimony I-4, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And you can see there we're in those high zones that you had 1,000 pounds of depletion up in those zones 1 and 2.
So now in this exhibit, Mr. West, you also include a top of San Andreas, correct?
Yes,
And
that's correct.
that's Empire's pick for the top of the San Andreas in this well, correct?
At the time of this, yes, that is.
Has it changed?
I would have to reference, I don't think. If it did, it's just a couple of feet if it did change.
Okay. So somewhere around, 4,000 measured depth. Is that measured depth? It's not TVD. Do you mean TVD?
Well, it's referring to the subsea depth over there, but I mean, in a vertical well, TVD and measure depth is virtually the same.
I thought it was referencing the top of the San Andreas.
Well, it's referencing in this well bore
Okay.
that, that measure depth in it, which it'd be a safe assumption to assume on a vertical well that, TVD and measure depth are correct.
Okay, I'm following. Okay, so somewhere around 4,000 feet is Empire's pick for the top of the San Andreas. Agree?
Yep,
Okay.
around 4,000. It's 3,975 here.
But it's no shallower, or rather, no deeper than that RT pressure measurement at 4,006 feet. Agree?
Well, structural position would be depending on where you're at on structure. So it would depend on different well bores.
But I mean, you're asserting here that this pressure measurement that you're referencing in this exhibit is in what Empire has identified as a San Andreas. Agree?
In this well bore, that is correct.
In this well bore. So the top of the San Andreas in this well bore is above what you're saying is where this pressure measurement was taken, correct?
That is correct.
Right. Okay. It's close, but you're saying it's the top is picked just above where this pressure was taken, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So yesterday, Mr. West, we discussed this at some length, and I was asking you whether you had done yourself an analysis to determine whether or not this pressure measurement that you're indicating here and that you contend indicates that there's a pressure communication between what Empire has identified as the San Andreas and the Grayberg. I was asking you yesterday whether or not you'd done an analysis to determine whether or not this pressure reading at 4,006 feet is in Goodnight Midstream's disposal zone. Do you recall that discussion yesterday?
Yes, it is in the San Andreas.
Okay, that wasn't my question. We went back and forth about this yesterday, right?
Yeah,
And I was asking you whether you had done an analysis, and you were saying that you're sticking to your guns, that this is in the San Andreas, and we didn't determine yet where exactly in this well Empire had picked its permeability barrier. Agree?
We don't see a permeability barrier.
As far as our discussion, you and I, we did not put up on the screen or have any discussion about where Goodnight had picked its permeability barrier. Do you agree?
Or Goodnight picked, yeah, you did not put anything up on the screen of that.
So I do have a cross section that Goodnight has prepared that shows its pick, its permeability pick in the 211. This is prepared by Goodnight Midstream, Mr. Preston McGuire, and it shows at the top left, it shows Empire, New Mexico LLC, the EMSU 211 well. It shows on the cross section, the center well is the Empire EMSU number 1 SWD well. And then it shows on the far right, Goodnight Midstream's Rhino well, which is one of its disposal wells at issue in this case. And I'll just scroll down so you can see it. We indicated on the 211, or Goodnight did indicate on the 211 log the location of Empire's Pick, which is, right around 390. We said, oops, oh, sorry. Right around 3,975 feet. Would you agree with me that that's approximately around 3,900? Gosh, what number was it? Sorry. 3,975 feet.
Yes, the best that I can see the lines, that looks approximately to be the proper location.
Can't keep everything in my head. Okay. So you agree with me that that's approximate for, or if, Empire's Pick for the top of the San Andreas in that well. Agree?
That's correct.
Okay. And then below that with a black line is where Goodnight Midstream in this well has picked its top of the San Andreas, which is the top of its, correlates to the top of its permeability barrier. Do you see that?
I see what they've picked. I don't agree with their picks.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to, but this is based on the tops that Goodnight has provided to Empire and Discovery, and these are the picks that Empire has identified for this well. Okay. I'm not asking you to agree with them.
Understand?
Also on this image, it goes on to show Empire's San Andreas disposal zone within the EMSU SWD number 1. Do you see that?
Yes, the disposal zone that just has very small volumes going into it.
Right. That's the disposal zone. And then to the right, it shows Goodnight Midstream's Rhino well and the depth in the center track here, the depth track. It shows the perforations where Goodnight has perforated its well for disposal. Do you see that?
Okay, and it looks like it represents perfs.
Okay. And then it has an inset map that shows the location of those wells within the EMSU from A to A prime. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Examiner or Hearing Officer, I move the admission of this as Goodnight Cross Exhibit number 20.
It's not already in evidence in your case in chief.
It is not.
Any objection from Empire?
No objection.
All right, OCD,
No objection.
Rice,
No objection.
Pilot,
No objection.
it will be admitted.
So in this well, at least, between where Empire picks its top of the San Andreas and where Goodnight Midstream picks the top of the San Andreas and its permeability barrier, there's approximately, I'm not going to ask you to confirm, but approximately about 100 feet in this well, correct?
Yeah, it looks like 100, 110 feet difference between the picks.
Okay. In other wells, that difference can be more or less, depending on where you are on the structure and depending on where the picks are. Do you agree?
Agree that our picks and your picks don't line up.
Yep. So I'm just for purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to refer to this difference here between Empire's pick and Goodnight's pick. I'm going to call this, just for ease of reference, I'm going to call this the disputed San Andreas interval. Okay.
The difference between our pick, which is consistent with the state, and what Goodnight's trying to say is their pick.
I appreciate the additional commentary, Mr. West, but yes, I'm asking you just to agree with me that as between where Empire has picked and the San Andreas and where Goodnight has picked the San Andreas in this well, I'm asking you to agree with me for purposes of our discussion. I'm going to refer to that as the disputed San Andreas interval. Okay.
In this particular wellbore, yes, but I
yes,
think
exactly.
sometimes your guys' picks vary up and down.
I'm asking you just for purposes of this image, this exhibit. Okay.
This 110 feet in this well.
Correct.
Correct.
Just for purposes of our discussion, is that okay with you? So we can speak the same language.
I'll say correct.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
all right.
Maybe it wasn't.
So Now, that survey, pressure data survey that we were looking at in your exhibit I3 and I4, that was taken at 4,006 feet, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And looking at this log image of the AMSU 211, well, that is, I think these tick marks are about 10 feet. Isn't that right?
Typically, that's right. And it looks, I mean, I can't hardly see the tick marks, but
I don't think the scale is included on this log header, or we don't have the log header included, but I believe when you,
and I can see the middle one, which would be 5, 50, but
so you agree 10 feet, right?
we agree 10 feet what?
That each tick mark is a 10-foot interval.
Not that I can really read the tick marks, but I mean, I can read the 50 marks, but it's hard to read that, but we can approximate.
Okay. So would you agree with me that the 4,006 foot depth where that pressure survey data was taken is approximately at this indication where I've got my little blue box
Yes, it would be right in there.
right in there? Okay. And that would be within what Empire calls the San Andreas, but above Goodnight Midstream's pick for the top of the San Andreas, agree?
What Empire and the state calls the pick, yes.
Okay. Is it your opinion that that location is within Goodnight's disposal zone?
If you're calling the St. Andrews the disposal zone, yes, that would be within it.
No, I guess, Mr. Westlake, to be clear, looking at the Rhino well on the far right, I'm calling I'm calling Goodnight's disposal zone the interval below Goodnight's St. Andrews pick. Do you see that?
I see the Rhino well there, but I don't know what you're defining the disposal zone as.
I'm defining the disposal zone as the interval below Goodnight's St. Andrews pick across this cross section.
So firm reference of it would be the pick of the St. Andrews, not whether or not it's a Goodnight pick or not. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
You would be referring to, if we're talking with the state, it's of the St. Andrews is what you're calling is the disposal zone.
No, I'm calling disposal zone Goodnight Midstream's pick below Goodnight Midstream's pick for the St. Andrews. Do you see that?
So you're trying to come up with another spot of their disposal zone rather than calling it the top of the St. Andrews?
Mr. West, for purposes of our discussion, I'm trying to get on the same page, okay?
I'm trying to too. I'm just trying to understand exactly what you're.
What I'm telling you is, for purposes of our discussion today, Goodnight Midstream's disposal zone is this interval below what is indicated as on this exhibit as Goodnight's pick for the St. Andrews. Do you see that?
Okay, I can see. Yes, I can see where it's perforated in the St. Andrews.
So what I'm talking about when I refer to the disposal zone, I'm referring to the interval below this line on this exhibit. Do you see that?
Okay.
Okay. And is it your opinion that the 4,006 foot mark where the RFT test was taken for the AMSU 211 is within Goodnight Midstream's disposal zone?
I agree that it's within the St. Andrews.
Okay. Mr. Hearing Officer, I don't know that I can get him to answer, but I think he's being non-responsive.
My problem is we were talking about if you can scroll back up. When we were first talking about the 4,006 foot area, can you scroll back up?
Oh, the other direction?
No, up.
Oh,
Where we
to
see
the other.
names of the wells.
Yeah.
We were first talking about EMSU 211, and then you switched over to talking about Rhino 17-1. So I don't think he's being responsive. I think the record at this point is unclear.
Okay. So, Mr. West, I guess I'm asking, let me try to reframe the question then. In the AMSU 211, Goodnight Midstream has identified the top of its San Andreas pick. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And for purposes of my question to you, below that pick in the MSU 211 is identified as Goodnight's disposal zone. Okay.
Well,
For
Okay.
purposes of the question, okay, Mr. West, I'm asking you, for purposes of my question, the interval below that pick is what Goodnight refers to as its disposal zone, okay?
Okay.
So are you telling me, is it your opinion that the 4,006-foot depth where the RFT was taken in the MSU 211 is within Goodnight's disposal zone?
I object to the question as misleading because I do think it's conflating what's shown here with respect to different wells. The disposal zone that Mr. Rankin's asking about is not in the MSU 211.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I do find the question confusing. And maybe it's nomenclature and maybe it's just my lack of technical sophistication, but can you try it again?
Sure. Mr. West, in this cross-section, Goodnight Midstream has correlated its picks across each of these three wells. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay. And based on Goodnight Midstream's analysis, it has correlated its disposal interval across the depths identified in this cross-section. Do you agree?
Mr. Examiner, I object to Mr. Rankin testifying about what this exhibit shows Goodnight has done when Goodnight's witnesses haven't testified about it.
Well, if you want to, I consider it hypothetical. You want to phrase it as a hypothetical.
That's fine.
Do it that way.
Mr. West, assuming that Goodnight Midstream has correlated correctly its pick for the San Andreas across this cross-section, do you agree with me that Goodnight Midstream has hypothetically correlated its pick for the San Andreas across this cross-section?
It has Goodnight's picks across there, but I do not see Empire's picks across.
Very well. But in every instance, would you agree with me that Empire's picks for the San Andreas are above Goodnight's picks for the San Andreas?
I believe from the testimony before, sometimes they're right on top of each other, the same spot.
Okay, but they're not below Goodnight's picks for the San Andreas, are they?
I don't know every pick of it, but you would need to see the frame of reference of where our pick is going across to infer from one well to the left, the cross section to the right. If you drop my picks or Empire's picks across it, I can't really talk from one well in the cross section to one to the far right.
Well, I guess I could pull up Mr. Bailey's cross section, and I'm happy to do that because he's included a cross section of these wells. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Mr. Examiner, will you give me just a moment, like a 2-minute break so I can pull up Mr. Bailey's cross sections?
Sure.
Mr. Examiner, we're
sir.
coming up on the lunch hour. Should we just give them time to be able to just get their thoughts back together when we come back after lunch? We just take a longer lunch?
Mr. Rankin, would that give you the time you need for all of this?
Probably, Mr. Examiner, our hearing officer, I think we could take a lunch break now and come back at 1 o'clock.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman, for when we return?
Let's just return at 1:15. We can break for lunch and we'll come back at 1:15 like we have.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Then we'll see you at 1:15.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Rankin, you're still sharing your screen. You may want to stop.